Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar on the topic role of general counsel in the corporate sector, we have Suparna Rai with us, who's the managing partner in GSR Legal. Please, Suparna, go ahead. Thank you for your time, Suparna.
You're most welcome. First, I would like to begin with whoever offers you a job, take a detailed summary from the client offering you the job opportunity. Because you have to see for yourself that in the job that you're being currently offered, you can balance your personal and organizational objectives and then decide that you would like to work in the company. Something, for example, may not interest you. Something may interfere with your personal life, too much of traveling, etc. So it's important to get a summary of what the job offers you and then balance your personal and organizational objectives and then decide whether you would like to work for the company. Now, what I would suggest is that there are different jobs between Indian companies and multinational companies. But what I would suggest is that when you try for a job, then try for a job in a multinational company, because that gives you more leverage. What I would say is that in my experience, rising to the level of a general counsel in a corporate who can also be a director, who might not be a director but might be reporting to the board, is somewhere takes maybe 8 to 12 years to climb up to that level. What I've also written is just, does the job interest you? And if you see any further enhancement for yourself in the job. For instance, you might find when you go for an interview that you have several bosses that you have to report in the hierarchy for. And it's important to note how many bosses there are and how many bosses you have to report to. But if you are taken in the role of a general counsel in a corporate, which would mean 10 to 12 years experience at least in a company, then you're responsible for not just suggesting, law, but you are also responsible for suggesting innovative operatives, like different methods of doing things within the legal parameters. Obviously, you cannot cross the legal parameters. And that's something which you need to make the board clear about. And if you are general counsel, whether you're a director or you're not a director, you might also be reporting to the CEO. In fact, most probably you will be reporting to the CEO despite your boss someplace outside of the country. So you have to balance. The other side of the world operates in a different manner than this side of the world. So your boss is going to expect you, the CEO is also going to expect you to do your job, and you have to strike a balance between the two of them. Now, when you look for a job as a general counsel, there may be attractive options, but you might consider a family-owned business which runs in a different way and which has a clear-cut hierarchy in terms of reporting structure, or an MNC which runs in a different way. One of your jobs will be how to create a hierarchy reporting structure provided it's not there. It might be there, it might not be there. So you have to take people into confidence right from the paralegal to the manager legal, senior manager legal, and keep up a good rapport with them so that you can work as a team. Because doing things as a one-man job is not possible. Like I said, that you will have to report to the parent company and the CEO, which will require a lot of balancing. So that's something that you have to learn on the job, how to recognize, how to balance the Indian modalities with a company which may be, for example, based out of London, based out of Spain, based out of USA. They have different ethics, different work culture, different timings, and you have to balance all of that. What is of importance is bringing all of them on the same page and building a consensus, which at times may be difficult, but not impossible. So you have to make them understand how to do business and how to progress the business. And you have to help your outside bosses, your outside company, as well as your CEO, who might want things to be done differently. But the CEO's job is to expand the business growth. So he will make a lot of unreasonable demands on you. Now you have to balance both of them and bring the MNC and the CEO on the same page. And that will require a lot of, back and forth, telephone calls, conference calls, maybe meetings, where you have to make them understand that things are done within the legal parameters, but things are done a little differently here. It doesn't work in that part of the world, but it works in this part of the world. I would like to repeat that if you are trying to look for a good career break, then try in an MNC rather than an Indian company to learn more stringent targets and follow international culture. And you have to bring the both together on the same page. And when you bring both together on the same page, it can't be just you. It has to drop down to the entire organization, including your own department, first of all. The rest of the teams also have to understand that they have to work within the legal parameters, follow the ethics and the morals and the principles of the MNC, but not break the Indian law, but work within the real parameters. And that will require a little out of the box thinking, a little innovative thinking. Because, like I repeated last time, everything is not black and white, there are gray areas in law. So you have to exploit, you have to learn to exploit as a general counsel what are the gray areas which you can take advantage of. You have to understand the culture of the organization, which is very important. And different organizations have different cultures, different expectations, and what their main target is, their expansion of business interests and targets to be met, and the projected growth. Every CEO will give you a projected growth that he is looking for within the next 1 year. And you have to help him out together with your bosses outside the country in meeting the projected growth. Be prepared to take on the tasking of looking after the region, and therefore your legal knowledge should not just be restricted to India. Now, what happens in the role of a general counsel? That they sometimes are responsible not just for India, but also neighboring countries like Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, etc. We are not experts in those laws. So, one of the recommendations would be to educate yourself in those laws as well, because you might be looking after the region and not just the country. And you will be taken to task for the entire region and not the country. You will be asked whether you're a board member or not to attend the board meetings, whether you're a legal director or not. And you have to give regular briefings to the board as the board of directors are called, and there may be mandates given to, to you to do a certain thing within a certain timeline. So timelines are important. You can't miss the timelines. And in order to meet the timelines, again, it is important that you build a team, because it's, again, like I said, not a one-man show. And legal departments usually are small departments. They are support departments, so they don't believe in expanding the legal department too much. Whether 3 or 4 or 5 people are within your legal department, you have to keep themselves as part of a team building. When you brief the board of directors or the CEO or your boss, be concise but be polite in what can be done and what cannot be done. But as you connected to the top level, you must have alternate attractive plans to present to the board. If something cannot be done in a particular manner, then there are or there may be gray areas which you can explore and possibly build in front of them and make them attractive so that they can buy your theory and take it forward. Like I said last time, that it's important to identify the essential laws applicable to the business and that they are communicated to all the key managerial people in a simplistic manner. People don't understand legal language. Legal language is very tough. And when you explain to them, then you have to explain to them in a very simple manner as to how things can be done, what can be done, and what cannot be done. Because when you get into legal jargon, then people get confused. They're not experts in law, you are. So people get confused about what you mean. You have to provide them in overcoming legal hurdles in a proactive manner, which is satisfactory to the major stakeholders, which is the KMPs and the CEO and your bosses. Provide the board, whether you're a member and you're not, and your boss, who may be out of the country, about the legal forecasting for a year or two. keep exigencies in mind because you don't know what you might be faced with tomorrow. It might be a litigation, it might be a notice, it might be a stay order, it might be any sort of problem that you can come up with. So, therefore, they must be told that there's certain exigencies in mind that they should keep in mind, and for that, they should keep a budget. In order to back your role as a general counsel in a corporate, you have to keep on continuing the process to gain knowledge of your strengths and weaknesses, legal and non-legal, and improve on them. For instance, legal knowledge may be very good, but non-legal language like public relations, team building might not be up to par. So you have to really keep a check on your legal knowledge as well as the non-legal knowledge and continuously improvise on them. Develop your legal knowledge as per your organization needs. There are certain laws which are common to almost all corporates, which may be making contracts, drafting legal notices, etc. But there are certain knowledge which are peculiar to the business. For instance, insurance or food or health, pesticides or paints or dangerous materials, petroleum. So you need to develop your legal acumen as per what the organization needs from you, because they're going to continuously ask you questions and they are going to expect a viable answer from you. The first one of the questions that you should ask yourself, are you being able to build systems or dealing with things on an ad hoc basis? Ad hoc basis doesn't work. You have to build a system, in which I said that team building is very important, because sometimes you might not be there to do the job, you might be traveling. So you must know who are the people who are capable, to whom you can delegate work and take feedback from them. And they have to report back to you instead of the organization directly, to tell you what they have done, how they have done it, how they have overcome the difficulties. And as a general counsel, it is up to you so they have to report back to you and tell you what you've done, and it's up to you to give the final clearance as a corporate counsel, as a general counsel. One of the other things is that what systems can you put in place for knowledge development and constant updating of processes within and outside of a department. Now, it's important for your department to be updated with the law, with the amendments, and with the judgments. One of the systems is to put portals in place where they can keep themselves updated, and you can keep a check on whether they are doing it or not. But more than that, there are people within your organization who do not know anything about law and who need to also be updated as to what can be done and what cannot be done, including the amendment, including new laws which come into force. And as a corporate counsel, it would be your job to let them know what the latest updates are and what can be done and what cannot be done. If you need help to develop your non-legal and legal skills, then you can always talk to your boss on a one-on-one basis and take his help further so that he can probably recommend you to certain areas where there are practical practice areas where you can be made a party to go to interact first of all with different departments, build up a rapport with them, and also learn how they work and what is their system of thinking. The very first thing that you must do, which I've already talked about, is team building, and you require to improve your communication for it. For instance, it's once a year that's a performance appraisal is done, by a boss. But it's always good, and it makes the other person, your team people, feel better if you walk up to them from time to time, check on them, and see what they are doing for yourself, and keep a tab on them, and make them more enthusiastic and more motivated to do their job properly. Now, when you talk to the board members or the CEO or your boss or the KMPs within your organization or any other person, then you have to be very careful how to frame your replies and queries. The queries should be the ones which are essential for the business, and the replies should be polite and courteous, but at the same time, they should know what can be done and what cannot be done in order to avoid litigation or any kind of possible problem in the future. One thing is that it's not good to be afraid to take a 360-degree feedback from your boss, colleagues, as it will improve your skills further. If they want to talk to you, if they want to tell you that there's something that is not quite correct about your behavior, about your courtesy, about your PR, then it's good to think about it and try and improve it. Set your priorities, because as a general counsel, there will be not one job, but there'll be multiple jobs that you will be asked to do within a day. And it's good to set priorities in a manner that what has to be done first has to be done first. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the way we go. So if you need to buy time, that give me 1 hour, give me 2 hours, give me 3 hours, and I will complete your job, or give me a day, then it's all right. Because you have to make the people understand that there are other things that you're doing which are on a priority basis, and there are certain things which can wait for a day or two, and you can work on it in a day or two, and you can take the help of your delegates. You cannot handle all regions by yourself, as it requires a lot of travel, and therefore there must be someone at the corporate level you can trust in your absence and who reports to you. Again, I said that that person is not capable or competent enough to report to the board or the CEO or your bosses directly, but as you are the boss, he has to report to you. And once he reports to you, then you have to go through what he has done, point out the mistakes, and rectify them. And not only that, but you have to make that person understand where he has gone wrong, he or she, and where that person needs to improve further. The GC has to be a legal counsel, maybe in the board of directors. And when you're dealing with such senior people, it's good to be diplomatic and a good manager, because there's a difference. In courts, we are very aggressive in fighting our cases, but in corporates, we need to have managerial skills also, which require a lot of training. So that doesn't come in a day. It will come over a period of time as you grow within the organization from a junior level to a senior level. And by the time you reach the general counsel level, you would probably have good managerial skills. But at the same time, if there is a negative feedback, then that should be adhered to, and that should be something which you should try and improve on. The next thing I want to talk about is IPR, intellectual property rights.
So, before you start with the IPR, I have a question. So,
Sure.
you have spoken about that identify the areas where you need to develop your skills, and then you can take the help of your boss in case you don't find proper help. Now, generally, people hesitate in asking help from their boss. They think that their boss might get a negative impression about them. So, what about that?
Well, the one thing that I would suggest is that keep your boss on your side, because bosses can become negative, and if they become negative, then you have a threat of losing your job. So it's good to keep your boss positive, and he should be happy about your work. In fact, he should be more positive about you than negative. And that will only come through your work. When you show results and you show positive results, then even if there are one or two negative aspects, he may tend to overlook them.
Okay, so Parna, so we can start with IPR now.
Okay, IPR, intellectual property rights, are very important because they reflect the goodwill of the company. It's the brand name that sells. Um, the company's name may be big, but usually it's the brand name that sells, for instance, Bournvita, Horlicks, Complan, um, chewing gums or pesticides or whatever. So brand names are very important to protect. And in order to protect your intellectual property rights, be aware of the goodwill that is associated with it and follow immediate registration process. Apart from copyright, which is automatically registered with the C in a circle, the moment it comes out in the public domain, the rest of the intellectual properties have to be registered. So there should be no delay because the prior user gets the first right to use the name. And if the goodwill of a company is adversely affected, then it might be affected through a stay order in a court, which means loss of business, which means loss of your job. Advise your organization properly what can or cannot be protected. For instance, there are already names in the market or similar sounding names which cannot be protected. So it's very important to do a background check before you protect a name to see whether it can be protected or not. And if it can be, then no delay should occur in protecting your trademark or your patent or your design. In this case, as far as intellectual property rights are concerned, there's a certain sense of confidentiality. The board members or the KMPs decide on a particular name, on a particular brand name, on a particular label, and they go ahead with it. And it's important that you advise your organization that you should be the one who is involved right from the beginning to tell them about the pitfalls, about what can be done and what can't be done, because there are always alternatives. In this case, like I said, maintain confidentiality because brand names or things are confidential. And once they are registered or they are not registered and you're using them as a prior user, it's important to keep the papers in safe custody. Because in case there is an opposition to what you have registered or what you're going to register or what you're using without registration, then that can stop your business temporarily, not permanently. So those papers are proof of the fact that you are the prior user and you have a right to use the name. Prepare case studies on legal hurdles faced by the company in the past and provide how the same can be overcome by adopting different methods. There are no companies, there are hardly any companies who had no litigation on the IPR front. So when you join as a general, as a corporate counsel or as a general counsel, you will have certain information about what has gone wrong in the past and how it could have been overcome. So again, it requires an out-of-the-box thinking and innovative thinking on what can be done. I'm skipping mergers and acquisitions. We'll take it up later. I'm going down to compliance because that's something that the GC is also related to. He's not only responsible for legal, but he's also responsible for due diligence. There may be companies which have a separate due diligence department, compliance department, but mostly this is put under the same department, which is the legal department. So due diligence is something that is not only applicable in the head office, but also in different sites, which means different states. So you not only have to be acquainted with the central law, but you also have to be acquainted with the state laws. And a due diligence compliance list together with you and your delegates has to be made and has to be circulated amongst the company. But first and foremost, you have to tell them why you're doing it, what is the need for it. And once they understand, then you give them the compliance list and they ensure that they fulfill it and give it to you. The best people who can do it are the ones who are in the sales department or who are in the sites, because the site managers are the people who are responsible for complying with the due diligence, and the sales managers, I'll just go back to IPR, are the ones who are responsible for bringing to your attention infringements and piracies. For instance, when I worked with GlaxoSmithKline, they were not just, I'll give you a practical example, they were not just, Boost became Booster, and Crocin became Crocinol, and the A all was written in such small letters that you couldn't quite figure out the difference between Crocin and Crocinol. And when we checked, we found that the Crocinol is nothing but ash powder. So that's very dangerous for human beings. And as people who are in the sales department, who are in the market, are responsible for identifying not just infringements and pirates, and they have to be trained to get back to the legal department in time so that you can take timely action against them for piracy or for infringement through court actions. Anyway, the GC has to be, I've already said this, the GC has to be cognizant of both central and state laws and ensure compliance. Because if he does not ensure compliance in any of the sites, then those sites can be shut down. The other thing that the GC has to do is work in close conjunction with HR and several other departments to deal with employee issues, including mandatory sexual harassment, constituting the board for it, for which 50% of the people have to be women, as far as somebody has to be in from the NGO. And the GC has to know all this. Plus, there are whether it's Indian companies or it's MNCs are more stringent with gifting and bribes. So they don't believe in that. As far as the CEO is concerned, he doesn't care really how, but he wants the work done. So one of the ways is that you don't take the risk of giving bribes or gifts to anybody, but you appoint consultants where you pay them X plus Y. X would be their salary, and Y is the amount that they would take to get the work done. So for these consultancy agreements are important. So in mostly in MNCs, make sure that they are followed in letter and spirit. Most MNCs have a global policy, and it is your job to see that the same are followed by every employee, not just the legal department, but every employee. They have to be connected with what the policies of the multinational or whichever company you're working with, whether it's an Indian company, um, allows and doesn't allow. You must have key information of the same, which you will have as part of the board. Being a director or not a director, but you will be privy to a lot of inside information, including information as to what they intend to do in the future. So once you're privy to that information, you can tell them right up front what they can do and what they can't do and what is the best method to do it. I've already talked about it that when we make a compliance checklist, we make a dashboard system so that because it becomes very difficult to work on Word documents, so we normally work on Excel sheets where dates can be changed and the compliance can be periodically updated as per the current demands. But it's important that you give to all the sites, including the headquarters, the compliance checklist well in advance so they can get back to you in time. So they can get back to you in time and you can inform the board which sites are not following mandatory or non-mandatory compliances. For instance, contract labor in some states is a very difficult problem. So one has to be very careful in how to handle contract labors. Usually it's done through a third party. We give it to a third party to negotiate and put the contract laborers on their own payrolls, because contract laborers, if they strike or call a union strike, then the factory or the manufacturing site or the office can come to a close. What is important is to understand also the conflict of interest and keep your organization and legal department aware of the same. Now, here I would just like to give a small example that, there was in 2002, there was a World Cup cricket match in South Africa in which there were certain people who were given lotteries, kids, inside a boost jar. And 50 kids were selected to go to South Africa. But I didn't know that boost was involved. in this, and that came into conflict with Bonvita. And I had advised a friend of mine, purely as a friend, that instead of going for just intellectual property rights, you can go for hostile marketing. And when I found out that Boost is also involved in this matter, it was too late. So the directors and their wives were all supposed to go to South Africa to attend the World Cup. But the danger became such that none of them went, instead sent me, and to control the 50 kids so that they don't advertise Boost in South Africa, which could land us in jail. So conflicts of interest like these, I made a mistake, which was in 2002. I advised a friend of mine, and that became a conflict of interest with the company. So one must know when to advise, who to advise, and if you're on the payrolls of the company, then not to give unsolicited or solicited advice to anybody else. One thing as a general counsel is that a general counsel is always there and available for you. If he's traveling or she's traveling, then their mobile phones should be on switched on mode so that anybody from the company can get through to you and seek your advice. And you can, if you are not in a position, if you're traveling in a faraway destination, you can delegate to somebody junior as to do the homework and cross-check it out and then advise the company. When you hire subordinates as a general counsel, it's very important to understand who you're subordinating and who you are taking on your payrolls, because that person just doesn't have to have legal acumen and excellent qualifications, but also has to have managerial skills. So when you interview, then it's important that you cross-check on all the aspects, in which it's important also to study the body language, eye-to-eye contact, and certain questions you ask for which they might not always have an answer, which is all right. But it's still important to be very cognizant that the person you're hiring as your subordinate is capable of doing the job. And it's your job as a general counsel to train them and tell them about their individual responsibilities. Sometimes are divided, sometimes due to shortage of people, there is not a clear-cut division and people have to multitask. So one, as a general counsel, you have to tell them about their multitasking, about their individual responsibilities, and also tell them how to prioritize. Because it's not important for a general counsel himself to know how to prioritize, but he must pass it on to delegates, because general counsels change and delegates are promoted to the same position. So they must know how to do things in a proper manner. I've already talked about this. Talk to your colleagues in a regular manner and assess their mindsets. If something is disturbing them, talk to them about it. It might be something personal, it might be something professional. But if you have an excellent rapport with them, then it will boost their confidence in you and make them help you out more, which will be easier for your jobs. And all the time, learn to motivate your colleagues instead of demoralizing them. If I keep on pointing out their mistakes, it will demoralize them. So if they make mistakes, I should tell them in a proper manner that they're making mistakes, but how to rectify them and how things can get better. Learn how to make a performance appraisal, which will probably come down from your bosses. But when you go through your own performance appraisal, you learn how to make other people's performance appraisals and calculate their bonus accordingly. The last thing we come to is corporate governance. Corporate governance includes when to file litigations, how to file it, if necessary, when to file it, if you're filing a writ petition. In those circumstances, be risk conscious. Private individuals are less risky. Governments can be more risky. And before you do that, decide whether they can be avoided under any circumstances. Under any circumstances doesn't mean compromising on your position. If things need to be done, they need to be done. But if it can be avoided, it should be avoided because litigations are time consuming as well as very expensive. And in case there is an interim order, then that's something that can cause a lot of loss to the company. And if you decide to take any action, then don't do it yourself. Do it in consultation with the board members and the KMPs, as courts tend to lead towards the government.
Thank you, Suparna. I think it made the picture clear for people about role of general counsel in the corporate sector.